Hi readers, welcome to Novels with Nat. It is the end of September, so it's time for a September wrap up. So I had a fairly good reading month in September. I'll say it was good based on I read a lot of books, but it wasn't so good based on I ended up not enjoying a lot of the books. So we are definitely moving into the season where I read more. I read the most in fall and winter, which I feel like is maybe a little bit counter to the majority, who I feel like a lot of people read a lot in the summer. Maybe it's just the type of books I read. I really like thrillers and horror, and maybe that just coincides better with those months of the year. Whatever it is what it is. I really enjoy reading in the fall. So I want to talk a little bit about all the books that I read in the month of September. So we first have to start off with a little bit of stats of my reading month. So let's get into it. So this month I DNF'd 2 books and I completed 11 books. If we look at the genre breakdown, the majority of the books that I read this month were thrillers and mysteries. I read 6 of those, which is pretty standard for me to have about half of my reading be thrillers. I then read 1 fantasy book, 2 literary fiction, and 2 nonfiction. I always aim for at least 1 nonfiction a month, so this month I got to 2, so that's fun. And then if we look at the ratings, again, you'll see here that my ratings are fairly low this month. I had 1 star, which is a fairly uncommon thing for me. I don't give books 1 star often, but I just really hated this book. It was so bad. I should have DNF'd it, but I pushed through. I also had 2 2 stars, 2 2.5 stars, 1 3-star, 1 3.5 star, 1 4-star, 2 4.5 stars, and 1 new 5-star favorite. So I had, I guess, what is that in total? 4 books that were 4 stars and above. So that's not bad, actually, now that I think about it. It could be worse. So all in all for the month, my average rating was 3.14. I guess that's equivalent to pi, the number pi. This month, my average was pi. I think that's pretty low for me. I typically don't see it that low, so that's not great, actually. But it is what it is. Hopefully next month will be better. So let's go through the books that I read from my least favorite or lowest rated all the way up to my favorite. So we have to start with DNFs. I DNF'd 2 books this month. Now that I think about it, I really should have DNF'd more. There were probably 2 or 3 other books that I just wasn't enjoying, and I probably should have DNF'd them, but I pushed through. I'm still trying to get better about that. I used to be the type of reader that would never DNF, and just once I start a book, I have to finish it, but I am trying my best to know when to put a book down. So I'm making progress. I'm not perfect. I still sometimes force myself to read books I'm not enjoying, but we'll get there slowly but surely. So the first book I DNF'd was Tweak by Nick Sheff. This is a memoir. This is the story of the son from the memoir Beautiful Boy by David Sheff, which I read, I think last year or earlier this year, and I absolutely loved it. It was so good. It's basically about a father whose son struggles with addiction, and it's about him sort of grappling with the situation, trying to help his son, but also trying to protect his other children. And it was just really well written. So I was curious to pick up the memoir written from the son's perspective. This is his memoir or account of the story. And I just couldn't take it. The writing was so bad. The story just was jumping all over the place. It was disjointed. I couldn't even follow it at times. I made it about a quarter through and I was just not interested. Memoirs, I really look for strong writing. I think you really have to have strong writing to deliver a story in a memoir, and this one just didn't have it, so I ended up DNFing this one. The second book I DNF'd was one that I was listening to on audio. It's kind of like a popcorn thriller, and it is The Final Scene by Steph Nelson. So this one, the writing was just not good. The characters were insufferable. I just couldn't do it anymore. I ended up DNFing at around 20%. All right, now let's talk about the books that I actually did complete. My lowest rated book for the month at 1 star was The Perfect Family by Robin Harding. This book was so frustrating. At the end, I was just like, what was the point of all that? It was just a very not satisfying ending. It just felt like there was no thought put into the plot, that it was just kind of made up as she went along writing it and just sort of assigned who was responsible for what, just randomly in whatever way was convenient. I just really didn't like this one. I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the plot twists. Supposedly there were twists. just overall, one of the worst books I've read this year. I gave it 1 star. I hate ranting about books. I hate being negative about books, but I would really not recommend this one at all. Honestly, it makes me a little bit nervous because I also have The Drowning Woman by this author on my physical TBR, and I've heard so many people rant and rave about how good that book is. But I feel like now going into it, I have like a bit of a, I'm skeptical because if I give an author 1 star, I usually don't pick up their books again, but I really want to read that one. So I'm going to have to give it a shot. I hope I enjoy it, but we will see. Next up, we have a book that I finished actually just this morning. This one also is one that I should have DNF'd. It is The Last Time I Saw You by Liv Constantine. Um, this is the author duo that wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish, which I think if you've been watching this channel, you'll know that it is one of my favorite books of all time. But I've read now 2 other books by this author, and I have not enjoyed either of them. I'm starting to think they were maybe just a bit of a one-time author for me. Um, I'll still read their books. I'm still curious, but so far I haven't enjoyed any of their books aside from The Last Miss Parrish. This one was just so convoluted. There were a lot of characters. There was a lot going on with the plot. I honestly, like when the reveal happened at the end, I was like, who even is that? Like I couldn't even remember who that person was that was responsible. So I should have DNF'd this one. I had a feeling at the beginning, but I pushed through just because it was a short book. It's like about just 300 pages. But yeah, wouldn't recommend. This one I gave 2 stars. Then the second book I gave 2 stars this month, for similar reasons actually, is You Are Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. This was the last book that I had to read to finish this author duo's entire backlist. And unfortunately, I saved the worst for last. This one was by far my least favorite. I really didn't enjoy it. I also gave it 2 stars. Um, Similar reasons to the last book that I talked about. There was a lot going on with this plot. It really lacked direction. And as a result of it lacking direction, I stopped caring. I feel like the book really dragged on. It was convoluted. The characters weren't interesting to read from. Um, I don't know. I just feel like it also really just lacked a big twist. I wouldn't recommend this one. If you're going to read a book from this author duo, my personal favorite is Anonymous Girl. I also really enjoyed The Wife Between Us, but I would skip this one and I would skip The Golden Couple. I also didn't care for that one. All right, next up we have a young adult thriller, and it is Ace of Spades. This book I had high hopes for. I usually don't love young adult, but the concept of this one sounded really good. This one is basically about 2 students at a prestigious school who start getting anonymous text messages from someone who calls himself Aces. I had high hopes for this one. The premise sounded really good, but the book, in my opinion, was number one, far too long. Number two, I feel like it sort of was, as you're reading along, you can start to piece together what's going on. It didn't have like that shocking twist factor that I want in a thriller. There was some good social commentary and it was a good idea. I like the concept. I just feel like the execution was poor, and I think it had potential, but it just wasn't there. It just needed a lot of work, and the execution is where it fell short. So I didn't really enjoy this one. I gave it 2.5 stars. All right, next up we have a memoir that I read this month. I read a book called The Lafferty Girl, I believe is pronounced. I ended up getting this one through NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley and the publishers for a copy in exchange for a review. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy this one. I gave it 2.5 stars, which is for me very low for a memoir. I love reading memoirs. I read a lot of memoirs. This one was just poorly written. So I just want to be clear that when I rate memoirs, I'm never rating the person's life, their life story. Like that is their story. Like there's nothing for me to be rating about that. But what I am rating is the writing style as well as the quality of the storytelling. And this one just unfortunately was not good in my opinion. It was difficult to follow. It wasn't engaging. I just didn't really care where it was going. It just the structure of the writing I felt like was poor compared to other memoirs that I've read. So this one was 2.5 stars, unfortunately. All right, next up we have a new release, and it was The Break-In by Catherine Faulkner. This one I read from my library. I have read now Catherine Faulkner's entire backlist. She has 3 books published so far. I'm starting to feel like she's probably not the author for me. I really enjoyed The Other Mothers by her, but Greenwich Park, as well as this one, not so much. I gave them both 3 stars. And I think the reason I'm gravitating away from this author is that her stories are very, very overly complicated. They're the type of thriller book where there are just so many plot points and so many characters and so many little clues and interconnected things that it just feels like you start losing a hold of what's going on, and it just is overly complicated for no reason. And I feel like sometimes less is more when it comes to thrillers. When you throw a ton of characters and a ton of plot points, it can kind of be discouraging as a reader to read a book like that. And then when it gets to the end, you have to like sit down for like an hour and try to go through and connect everything all back in your mind, and it's just not fun. So I don't know if I'm going to continue reading from this author. She's not a bad author. She reminds me in writing style a bit of Lisa Jewell, but just a lot more convoluted of a story. So yeah, 3 stars. It was fine. I just found it a little bit too complicated. All right, next up we have this little book. It is Convenience Store Woman. It's just such a tiny little hardcover. It's so cute. It reminds me a little bit of the size of the book Perks of Being a Wallflower, like a tiny kind of square book. It's really interesting. This, I believe, is a translation. Yeah, it's a Japanese translation. This is the same author as Earthlings, which I have not read. I was intrigued about this one. It's basically about a woman who works at a convenience store, and she kind of goes against what society tells her you should be doing or the point that she should be at in her life, but she is just happy with her life. She likes working at the convenience store. She likes that she's sort of single and unmarried and she doesn't have kids. And it's just about, it's like a story with commentary on societal expectations and what people tell you you should do with your life, but just about focusing on what you want to do with your life. And so I enjoyed it. It was good. I liked the commentary. It was a quick read. It just wasn't an all-time favorite. I gave it 3.5 stars. All right, and then this month I also got around to reading another Taylor Jenkins read. I had read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I loved it. It is one of my favorite books of all time. I gave it 5 stars. I would classify it as one of like my 6-star reads. So I want to read more from her. I have a few of her books on my physical TBR, and this month I decided to go with Carrie Soto is Back, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't at the same level as Seven Husbands for me, but I liked the story. I personally am not super interested in tennis, so maybe that's why my enjoyment was a little bit lower. I, however, really liked the writing. She's an amazing writer. I liked the characters. I liked following along the story. I liked the sort of underdog trope. So it was good. Overall, 4 stars, but not my favorite from her. I am excited to check out Daisy Jones and the Six next, is my plan. And I also have a copy of Malibu Rising. So I'm going to work my way slowly through her entire backlist. Whenever I'm in the mood for a literary fiction, I think I'm going to gravitate towards her. I don't read a lot in that genre, but I tend to enjoy her writing. So I'm going to read more from this author for sure. All right, now we are on to our 4.5-star reads. I had 2 of them this month. One of them was the new Sherry Lapina book, which I am surprised by because Sherry Lapina can really be hit or miss for me. Some of her books I really don't enjoy. I wasn't fond of that one. I think it's called One Perfect Family, something like that. I wasn't super fond of The Overnight Guest, but I did really enjoy The Couple Next Door, Everyone Here Is Lying, as well as her newest release. This one is about it's sort of a domestic thriller murder mystery. It takes place in like a luxurious condo building. And so you've got all the people that sort of live in this condo building. A woman ends up being unalived, and then we're following the mystery that unravels from there. I just really enjoyed this one. It was compulsively readable. It was fast paced. It was just really fun. I really enjoyed it. I had a good time. I didn't think it was overcomplicated. I didn't think it had too many characters. It was easy to read. Just a good thriller. I would definitely recommend this one. I had a great time. And then the second 4.5-star I read the memoir of Christine. She is one of the women on the show Sister Wives on TLC, which is kind of my guilty pleasure. I love watching that show. And so when I saw she had a memoir out, I of course had to check it out. I listened to this one on audio, and I thought it was really good. I honestly was completely enamored by it. I read it in a span of like 24 hours. I just devoured it, and it was really entertaining. It was great to hear her story in her own words. And I really enjoyed it. I think the only reason I didn't give it a full 5-star is because I think the writing wasn't the best of the best. I think if we're talking about really well written memoirs, like I would recommend I'm Glad My Mom Died, or also Beautiful Boy by David Sheff. And then also, if you're looking for like a good memoir based on reality TV, I think also Counting the Cost by Jill Duggar was really well written. I thought that one was great. This one wasn't poorly written by any means. I just feel like it wasn't quite at that 5-star level, but it was still really good. All right, we are down to the final book that I read last month, and it is the only 5-star book that I had in the month of September, and it is a surprising one for me, honestly, but it was Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. I was drawn to this book because of the premise. Essentially, it is about two rival PhD students who journey together to hell to save their professor. So I was gravitated to it because of that synopsis. I love the dark academia trope. I love the idea of following graduate students. I was a graduate student at one time, so I felt like I could probably relate to it. And I was really wanting to read it and see how that aspect of the story was written. However, I was a little bit nervous because it does have a romance subplot and it is also fantasy, which are both two of the genres that I probably read the least. But I was like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a shot. I read Yellowface by this author and absolutely loved it, but I had never read any of her like actual fantasy books. I decided to take a shot on this one, and I'm so glad that I did. I loved it. It has become probably one of my top 3 books of the year so far, which is crazy to me. I've never had a top 3 book be a fantasy book, but here we are. I felt like the commentary on academia itself was so well done. While it is a fantasy book, a lot of the discussion on academia was very much realistic and grounded in reality. It talks about sexism in academia, it talks about ethics in research. I just really enjoyed that aspect of the story. I also felt like the fantasy element itself and the sort of journey through hell was interesting. It was intriguing. I liked it as well. I'm not sure how this will go over for like true fantasy readers. It felt like a little bit of a mix between fantasy and romance and dark academia. It didn't feel super strong or super heavy on any one particular genre. It was a really good mix, which I enjoy, but I'm just not sure how other people will take that. But for me, it was 5 stars. I think the more I sit on it and think about it, it might even be one of like the books that I classify as a 6-star. Only time will tell. Those ones sort of develop over time. If it's a book that you continuously think about and are pondering and recommending, that's when it kind of gradually makes its way into my favorites of all time. But it has a chance. It definitely was really good, and I enjoyed it very much. It's a thick book. I think it's somewhere just under 600 pages, if I'm not mistaken. About 530-ish. And I devoured it in like 4 days. So I would definitely recommend it. I did film a reading vlog dedicated specifically just to this book. I'm not sure if it's going to be up before or after this video, but if it is up before this video, I will link it down below. Check it out. If it's not, then keep a lookout for it very soon. I go into full detail about my thoughts and what I liked, some critiques as well. I did have a few critiques, and it's going to be completely spoiler free. So if you haven't read it yet, you're still safe to watch the video. Yeah, I just had a great time with this one. I'm very happy. All right, so that is my monthly wrap up for September. I feel like I've been talking for quite a while. I got through a decent amount of books. Overall, ratings wise, wasn't the best reading month, but I did get through quite a few books, at least for my typical reading pace. That's quite a few books for me. Knocked some off of my physical TBR, which I'm always happy about, as well as kept up with a couple of books that were newer releases that I always read from my library. So yeah, that is everything. Let me know in the comments what your reading month was like in September. What is your favorite book that you read last month? Let me know what it was and what you rated it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in another one very soon. Bye.